Vayikra. Certainly the beginning of Sefer Vayikra is a challenge. The Sefer Vayikra actually took about a month in the history of the Jewish people. It's easily worked out from the, just please put your phones away. Make sure your phones are away. Totally away. It's so easy to see people looking at phones. I haven't even started sources, so you can't be looking at sources. So it took a month. You can tell from the beginning of Sefer Vayikra and the beginning of Sefer Vayikra exactly how long Sefer Vayikra took. And it's read very quickly because there are a lot of double parshas in Vayikra. And by the time we get to Shavuot, we're finished with Vayikra. And that's taking into account different chagim when we don't read the parsha. So it's not a long sefer, and it's also a sefer with very little narrative at all. The only narrative that we have in the sefer is really Nadav and Abihu, the story of Nadav and Abihu and the consecration of the Mishkan. Around about there, a few other little stories, but really no stories at all, a lot of detail. So the question is, what is Sefer Vayikra? And I want to carry on with a theme that kind of came together, carry on with a theme, which was the Ramban's theme. If you remember, I quoted that Ramban at the beginning of Parshat Teruma, which is a fundamental Ramban, where the Ramban says that essentially the Mishkan is the ongoing Har Sinai. Right? The Mishkan is the Hemshech of Har Sinai. There's no Kedusha to Har Sinai. The Torah is given at Har Sinai. The Matan Torah moves into the Mishkan, and the Mishkan moves. And then Har Sinai is just a mountain in the wilderness. It has no importance to it at all. There's no Kedusha to it at all. And taking that into account, that the Sefer of Shemot is a book that doesn't reach the climax. It's not enough to have a climax, Yitro and Mishpatim, if that climax is not then transitioned into something permanent. A one-time experience means nothing if you do not transition that experience into something more solid and more permanent. It doesn't mean anything. It just becomes a memory. And that's what Sefer Shemot is about. So when the Ramban calls Sefer Shemot Galut v'Geula, Geula, as far as the Ramban is concerned, isn't at Matan Torah. It has to be when Matan Torah is consecrated into a permanent Mishkan, which will become an even more permanent Mikdash. So with that in mind, now have a look at the words of the Ramban to start with. HaSefer Hazeh hu Torat Kohanim. So Chazal called the book Torat Kohanim, and as we'll see also in Rabbi Sachs, that's what the Latin name is, Leviticus, right? Leviticus is the book of Levium, right? Leviticus is the book of Levium, V'haleviim, Yevaer bo inyanei hakorbanot. So a lot about korbanot is in the Sefer. It's not the whole Sefer. Umishmeret hamishkan, and how to look after the Mishkan, how to retain the Mishkan. It's not enough to transition from Har Sinai to a Mishkan. You then have to retain that Mishkan. You have to keep it. Ki ka'asher haya sefer echad b'inyan hagalut v'hageula, just as Sefer Shemot, I called it, says the Ramban, galut v'geula, v'hishlimu b'inyano ha'moed v'kvod Hashem Hashem mileh ha'mishkan, and that's how it ends, with the glory of God coming down onto the Mishkan. That's how Sefer Shemot finishes. בקורבנות, סיבה ובקורבנות ובשמירת המשכן שיהיו הקורבנות כפרה להם ולא יגמרו המונות לסלק השכינה. In the point of Sefer Vayikra is, how do you keep the Mishkan? How do you retain the Mishkan? Once you've built a Mishkan, how do you retain it? And you have to retain it by being on the level that is your due, to be on that level. You understand it? It's not enough to sing "We Want Mashiach." It means very little. But you have to be worthy of having a Beit Mikdash. It's not a political reality. It's whether a people is worthy or not to have a Mikdash. A Mikdash is reflective of a religious level. And if you're not worthy, it won't be. And if you are worthy, it will be. But how do you become worthy? You need to do kapara. You need to come to the Mikdash. Not all about korbanot, as you know, if you have a look at Melachim Aleph Perek Chet, when Shlomo HaMelech consecrates the Mishkan. When he consecrates the Mishkan, he doesn't talk about korbanot at all. He talks about tefillah. Lishmoa el arina ve'el tefillah. He doesn't talk about korbanot. V'siva b'kohanim hanikashim el Hashem she'yitkashu she'yitzhiru al tumat hamikdash. So as far as the Ramban is concerned, we have to keep the Mikdash, which means keeping Shekhinah, keeping divinity. Okay, so keep that in your minds. That's what Sefer Vayikra is. It's a book about sustaining the Mishkan that we have established and having divinity in that Mishkan. Now, I didn't quote you Rav Sachs last week, I did the week before, but here Rabbi Sachs says something which is so similar to Netivot Shalom, but if you look at the title is, I called it Hashgacha Klalit and Hashgacha Pratit. And the deal that Rabbi Sachs makes here is just simply phenomenal. What he does here, you think sometimes when you're learning parashas, no one's going to be machadesh, right? What new can someone tell you? And when I was going through this, I thought this line was really quite incredible. Then I remembered the Netivot Shalom, who says the same thing, but he says it b'mishor ha'yachid. He says it in the micro, whereas Rav Sachs is talking about the macro. So just have a look at Rav Sachs here. Chazal karu l'chumash Vayikra Torah Kohanim. Now we said they call Vayikra Torah Kohanim. Gam Shemo Haloazi, and the Latin name, the CXX gave to the Targum Shivim gave to Vayikra is Bigvot HaYevanim, the Greek and the Latin, who Leviticus. Leviticus comes from Levi. Sfaram Shel Leviim. Kach Ya'el the Chumash, and that's really a very good summary of the book. It's about Leviim, it's about keeping the Mishkan established. Ki Yadu HaSipurim U'atum, but there's very, very few stories. V'rabim Bo Hadanim, and there are many, many halachot in Sefer Vayikra. And many to do with Kohanim. Many halachot to do with Kohanim. La'avototam b'mishkan v'mikdash u'latara. Le'umat zot. That's not what we call the Sefer. Vayikra doesn't mean Leviim. Vayikra is just Vayikra. We call it Sefer Vayikra. That's right. We don't call it Torah Kohanim. We call it Sefer Vayikra. Hashem HaMekubar Vayikra Nireh Akra, and it seems very, very not important, like it's the first word, so we called it after the first word. It's called Vayikra because the first word of the book says Vayikra. Hitmazel Mazala Shemilah Zo V'hi HaRishona HaMofiya B'Chumash. It's the first word in the Chumash, so it's called Vayikra. That's what it appears. V'lachein Kulan Nikra B'Shma Lichora En Keshet Beina Lebein HaNosim SheHaChumash Osek Ba. And it looks like there's no connection whatsoever between the name Vayikra and what the book is about, except for the fact that it starts with the word Vayikra. So I'm going to try and explain that is not the case. What he does here, I think, is brilliant. And the reason that I chose this subject today is because you'll see, I think you'll see, or you should see, that it's very, very pertinent to everything going on around us. If you open up a Sefer Torah and you see the word Vayikra, you'll see a very small aleph. It's Vayikra with an aleph, but a very small aleph. The pasuk said for Sefer Torah, he aleph ze'ira. It's a small aleph, okay? He nechteva b'katan. It's written small. Ki'ilu kiyumam ur'ar, as if it's not meant to be there. Why don't you just write a normal aleph? It says Vayikar aleph. Hamilah shenechteva ba'otiot regilot hi eifo Vayikar. So if you open up a Sefer Torah and you looked at it, you'd read the word Vayikar, not Vayikra, a small aleph, and then you'd add Vayikra. Sheperusheh hu nitkal. It happened. It happened. It just happened to be. He's damenu. There was an opportunity. L'umat Vayikra. What does Vayikra mean? She'inyana zimun. It's calling. It's not a coincidence. Vayikra Hashem. God called Moshe. So Vayikar means coincidence. Vayikra means he was called. So if I want to speak to one of you, I will call you. Vayikra, I will call you. It won't be by accident. I'll phone you or I'll text you. I said, I need to speak to you about something and we'll meet, or we won't meet, but it will be an intended meeting. Vayikra, I will call you. Vayikra merameset l'pgisha b'krit. But if you take the aleph away, it's more like a coincidence. I met you in the street. You happened to be there. I happened to be there. We said hello, and so on and so forth. Chazal. ברגישותם לדיוקות התורה, הבחינו בהבדל בין קריאה למשה שבראש חומש ויקרא לבין התגלותו של השם לנביא האלי בלעם. When God speaks to Bilam, which is in the next Sefer, right, in towards the end of Sefer Bamidbar, it says Vayikar. God didn't speak to Bilam often. And the Midrash says, Ma bein nevi'ei Yisrael nevi'ei umot ha'olam. What is the difference between prophets of the Jewish people and prophets of the nations? Rabbi Chama bar Chanina amayin HaKadosh Baruch Hu nigle al umot ha'olam ele b'chatzi dibur. When God appears to the nations, He's in a circumstantial way. It's by the by. Kama the tema Vayikra Elohim el Bilam. So it says Vayikra. God happened to speak to Bilam. Not Vayikra el Moshe, that he always speaks to Moshe. Vayikra el Bilam. Aval Nevi Yisrael b'dibur shalem shnema Vayikra el Moshe. So what does Rashi say? L'chol divrot l'chol amirot l'chol sim kidma kriya. Before God ever spoke, it says Vayikra. He calls first and then speaks. לשון חיבה, לשון של מלכי השם משתמשים בו, וקרא זה אל זה. אבל לנביאי אומות העולם נקרא אליהם בלשון הרע. When he speaks to the non-Jews, he speaks to them in a by-the-by fashion. Not really our issue here. אבל הטורים בפירושו התורה מתקדם סב נוסף וקושר זאת לאלף זעירה. He adds it to this, a connection to the small aleph. אלף דויקרא דזעירה שמשה לא רצה לכתוב אלא ביקר. Moshe was humble. He only wanted to say, God happens to speak to me. But when God gave him the Torah, he said, Vayikra. Oh, I speak to you all the time. Now, I'm going to skip the first half of the next page and go to Ma Perush HaMilah. Go over the next page and about, when you see where it says it's 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs down, Ma Perush HaMilah. He gives here, Rabbi Sachs, a lot of different opinions as to what the small aleph of what Vayikra means. אני נותן לברה כאיבה, אך המפרשים עושים עוד אפשרויות רבות. אונקלוס כן קושיו, רב סעדיה ענייניו מרי. הרשב"א מסביר מקרה ולא תדיר. Vayikra means it's not frequent, it's a coincidence, it happens to be. Now go further. רש"י עצמו כמו אחרים סבור שקרי קשור בדרך זה או אחרת למקרא. He wants to say that there is a connection between the word keri and Vayikra. At the end of the book of Vayikra in Parashat Bachukotai, there is a rebuke to Am Yisrael. And the rebuke to Am Yisrael is said that if you are not behaving as you should, then there will be punishments. And then each time it says, and if you think the punishments are by chance, in telchu imi bekeri, if you think things are just a circumstance, you think it happens to be that there's no kesher to what you're doing, then I will make it even worse for you. And if you still think it's only by coincidence, then I'll make it worse for you. And it will get worse and worse and worse until you wake up and understand that something is going on. So what Rabbi Sachs now wants to do is as follows, and he quotes the Rambam. This is a Rambam that we could spend hours on. The Rambam says, Mitzvah tasei min Torah. We'll come together in a minute. He says it's a positive commandment in the Torah. Lizok v'laharia b'chatzotzrot al kol sarot shetavo hasibur. To blow trumpets, to blow shofar, to pray when anything bad happens to Am Yisrael. Shne'emar al hatzar hatzorer etchem v'hareotem b'chatzotzrot. When bad things happen, you have to blow shofar, you have to pray. Klomar kol davar sheyitzar lachem, says the Rambam, any troubles that we have, Za'aku aleihem ba'ari. You've got to pray. You've got to turn to God. This is part of our repentance, is to understand that something is happening, it has a meaning, and to react accordingly. That if we pray when bad things are happening, it shows that we've understood that we're not behaving the way we should, that we've reacted accordingly. And that's what will get rid of the problems. Aval, in what the Rambam says now, Im lo yizaku, if we do not cry out, v'lo yariu, and we do not in any way react, ela yoru davar zeh b'minhag ha'olam. This is just the way it is. It just happens to be. This is history. That's what's going on. V'tzarezon ikron ikrit. You ignore the reality in front of you, and you say everything is by coincidence. And therefore there'll be more trouble. Now, Rabbi Sachs goes on to explain here something very interesting. There is a parsha in Sefer Bamidbar. I don't know whether you remember the parsha. You remember the parsha of the Nachash and the Nachashim, the snakes that attack Am Yisrael in the middle of the Midbar. So a lot of the Mepharshim ask the question, where do they come from? Like, where do they suddenly come from, these snakes? And the Rambam explains they were always there. God didn't bring the snakes. This is massive. God didn't bring the snakes. He removed his protection. The snakes were always there. He removed his protection. That's how I feel about the seventh month totally. They were always there. And suddenly we're surrounded maybe by 600 million people who don't like us. And if you think it's better in America, watch the news a bit. Watch the news. And if you think it's better in Europe, for God's sake, like crazy. They're complaining in Parliament that we're fighting Iran. It's Sadiqim of Iran. It's not one. It's evil ones, because you haven't got an army there. You haven't got your own government. He says what God does in these situations is he removes his protection. And people who always wanted to harm us, and suddenly they can. That's what happened with the Hashim in the Midbar. There are snakes in the desert. That's where they are. Scorpions, snakes. And God was protecting us with Adonai HaKavod. And when we did, he just removed his protection. And then we were laid bare to the reality. See what he says. It's not a stomach punishment, stomach nekama of God. Lo Hashem yikrom la'am Yisrael lispol, ela b'nei adam. Other people will make us suffer. Hashem rak yasir mehem et hagarato. God will repeat. He will remove his protection of us. He will remove his protection of us. And then we're in a lot of trouble. And essentially it's midah keneged midah. You say I'm not here. Okay, I'm not here. You say everything's by coincidence. Okay, have it your way. See if you can manage without me. And then we are on our own, more or less against the whole world. It's like absolutely unbelievable that we together with America, the only people fighting Iran. These people are the source of evil, the source of terrorism in the whole world, and everyone knows it. And the only people fighting them is Israel and America. That's it. And half Americans don't want to do it either. I don't know how long he'll be able to deal with that pressure himself. If you think that everything is by coincidence, I'm out of here. Okay, deal with it. You think you're okay without God? Have a go. See how you manage. See how you do. That's what the Rambam thinks. Midah keneged midah. It's midah keneged midah. Atem halachtem iti bekeri. You say everything's by circumstance. Okay. See how you fare. Have a go. See how you manage without God's help. However, if you believe that God is involved, if you believe that God is part of you, how does Nativot Shalom put it? Hashem silcha. The God is your shadow. Meaning the way you relate to God, he will relate to you. God is your shadow. Hashem silcha in Psalm 23. If you look at God and see God involved, God will react accordingly. And if you think history is just a collection of, it just happens to be, it's like a garbage, it's a beautiful phrase, this comes from Joseph Heller, a garbage bag of coincidences that got ripped up and then fell everywhere. כניסוחו של ג'וזף הלה, הם אכן ימצאו לך שדה המקרה. Then if you want to live by coincidence, do it. See how you manage. And you'll see it's not so easy to manage without siyata dishma. והיות שהם אומה קטנה וחלשה, אפשר לשש המזל לא יהיה להם. And see, with such a small people, with so few friends, you think maybe they wanted to talk about the freedom of the Palestinian people that never existed and never was? But now, who's talking about Zechuyot of Iran? So leave us to our own, we're finished. We got no chance, not a chance. This is incredible. The beginning of the book starts by Vayikra. God spoke. There is a relationship. The end of the book talks about Kerry. There's no relationship. It's all coincidence. It's all circumstantial. Everything happened to have happened. The whole of the history of the last 100 years is just My Rosh Hashiva used to say that people who don't celebrate Yom Ha'atzmaut are heretics. They don't believe in God. How can you possibly say the events of the last 100 years are a coincidence? How can you possibly say that? When in the history of mankind were a third of a people destroyed? Dismantled in gas chambers. When in the last 2,000 years has a people beat 7 nations in a war with 1 aeroplane? You want to say everything here is a coincidence? Everything happened to be, the Six Day War happened to be, all of the Jews from all over the world who come to Israel happened to be, everything's the same. Okay, sure, so that's what it will be. But if you go by Vayikra, not by Keri, that God is speaking to me, God is saying something to me. I don't understand all the time what he's saying, but I know that something is going on, then it's a different matter altogether. You can see the connection and why it's called Vayikra. Because the Mishkan is a place where there is Shekhinah, where there is a relationship with God. Vayikra El Moshe, God is speaking to Moshe. Moshe is reciprocating to God. There is a relationship. Mikra, which is calling, and Mikra, which is coincidence. Then Kara le Kara. Kara with an aleph, calling, and Kara happened. That's what Amalek are called, right? Asher korcha baderech. Amalek came along and said everything is circumstantial. There's no hashgacha, there's nothing. בין ההיסטוריה כקריאה מאת הקדוש ברוך הוא, בין ההיסטוריה כשרשרת הקראת וחסרת כיוון של מורה. Whether you see history as just a chain of events without any direction, or whether you see it as meaning something. You've known me long enough now, ladies, to know that I simply can't see the world as about getting a degree, even about doing Shiur. It's just so much bigger than that. I'm a little ant in something massive. And I have to concentrate on the individual things that I do, but it's nothing compared to the macro. Nothing compared to the macro. Second paragraph, next page. The small aleph at the end of the word Vayikra can hardly be heard. And you can hardly see it. Alter Sapur, says Rabbi Sachs, don't expect. Romezet lanu haTorah, the Torah hints. Shenochuchuto shel Elohim behistoria tiyeh tamid burah, that it will always be obvious. It's not always obvious. We're not going to have many seas split. And it's not always going to be so easy to discern. But Derek Klali, he's smuya, God is hidden. And then you have to find God. And you have to look for God. You look at events and you try to understand. I know that everyone's caught up in their own thing. And I don't happen to have my own thing, because my own thing is my country. But you understand that after you sort out where you're going and what you're doing, that there's something much more important than that going on. Much more important. And when you get a flight tomorrow, they are much bigger, much greater than my individual needs. And what I can do and what I can't do. God is hidden, and to discern God depends on my sensitivity to what's going on, my awareness of what's going on. It's totally necessary for people to be concentrating and focusing on their specific need, but to understand there's something much greater, much bigger going on. If you pay attention, you will see it. If you listen, you will hear it. But you have to pay attention and you have to listen. You have to pay attention and you have to listen and watch what's going on. And if you prefer not to see and not to listen, the Vayikra will return to Vayikra. It will just be a coincidence. God's calling will be left unheard. And history will just remain a coincidence. So you can see this is an ongoing process. And if you want to just explain things, as you all can, because you've all been alive over the last few years, and you can explain everything historically, as this happened because of this, and this happened because of this, and this happened because of this. In time, שההיסטוריה מקרית, אומר השם בפרשת תחס, if you believe that history is just a coincidence, היא תהיה מקרית, it will remain that way. It's Rabbi says, אבל האמת היא אחרת, but the truth is something else. ההיסטוריה של העם היהודי מעידה על נוכחותו של אלוהים בקרבו. The history of the Jewish people testifies to the fact that God is with the Jewish people. עמדו על כך ותיארו זאת ברהיטות אפילו הוגים שאינם יהודים. פסקל said it, רוסו said it, טולסטוי said it, שאם לא כן איך הוא יכול, אם עם כה קטן פגיע וחלש לשרוד, how can we still be around? No one likes us. No one likes us. Whatever we do is wrong. We're fighting a war for the world. Whatever we do is wrong. How are we still around? How do we still exist? How can it be even after the Shoah? And Rabbi Sachs never saw any of this. He died before all of this started. שעם ישראל חי. וממש כשם שההיסטוריה היהודית איננה רק מקרה. And just as Jewish history is not a coincidence. כך גם לא מקרה הוא שהמילה הראשונה בספר של מרכז התורה היא ויקרא. That's why it's called Vayikra. See how this fits in so beautifully with the Ramban. What did the Ramban say? He doesn't even quote the Ramban. And you can suggest maybe that I'm imagining what he's saying, but what did the Ramban say? The Ramban says we built a Mishkan, and the point of Sefer Vayikra is to retain divinity in the Jewish people. How do you retain divinity in the Jewish people? By having a relationship with God, Vayikra. But if you decide that there's no relationship, it's all carry, it all happened to be, honestly, I can't see it. Honestly, I can't see it. I can't see it. Ladies, you know, in the robber, there are lots and lots of people here who don't follow directives. And one of these pieces of shrapnel fell bang in the middle of the robber. In the car park, which is a very busy place. Normally there are cars going round and round. It hit no one. It hit no one. And it's one of many. Another piece of shrapnel fell straight through the roof of a yeshiva, a Hasidic yeshiva in Yerushalayim. Hit no one. We shouldn't be here. We're surrounded by people, if they wanted to just walk towards us, they would stampede us and throw us away. But we are here. And I wish that you would be able to see beyond that and see that. Maybe some of you can, maybe some of you can't, but see that. We're looking for Vayikra, not caring. There is a hashgacha klali, there is a plan, which I don't know where we are in the plan. I don't know how my part in the plan is or what my part will be, but I'm sure that something is going on, something incredible is going on. And that's hashgacha klalit. Now have a look at Netivot Shalom. And they come together, and it's so interesting how different pieces of Torah come together, because Netivot Shalom is Chassidut, Rabbi Sachs was Rabbi Sachs. ויקרא אל משה וידבר השם אליו מאוהל מועד לאמור אדם כי יקריב מכם קורבן להשם. איתה בבית אברהם. והד הכתיב ויקרא בלשון נסתר ולא נאמר מיהו הקורא. It says Vayikra, it doesn't say who's calling. It says Vayikra el Moshe. Then it says Vidaber Hashem. But it doesn't say Vayikra Hashem el Moshe. It says Vayikra el Moshe. He called to Moshe. It's a new book. If you wrote that in an essay in your English class, you would get an FS. You haven't got a subject there. Vayikra el Moshe. He called to Moshe. We didn't say who he was. שמומש בזה על בת-קול היוצאת בכל יום. This is classic Chassidut, okay? It says there is a bat-kol, there's a voice comes out of heaven every day, ואומרת שוב, and then it says, repent. Every day God calls to a Jewish heart to repent. So the Baal Shem Tov asked the question, if a bat call comes every day, a voice from Shemaim comes out every day and speaks to us, why can't we hear it? We can't hear it, I can't hear it. Can you hear a bat call? I can't hear a bat call. You made Shomim Ota, and if you can't hear it, so why does it come out? What's the point? A bat call comes from Shemaim every day for all of us to hear. We can't hear it, and if we can't hear it, so why does it come? And the Baal Shem Tov said, it's an awakening in the heart of a Jewish person. He will elaborate. Even the lesser strata of Am Yisrael will sometimes awaken. And they awaken because of the sound of this bat call. והחכם שנע בראשו מקיים בהתעוררות הזאת בחינת אחזתים ונוערתנו עד שהבאתי לפנימיות נפשו. וזהו פירוש. This is what I want to explain. It says נתיבות שלו. ויקרא משה בלשון נסתר. God speaks to Moshe in a hidden manner. It says ויקרא. It doesn't say ויקרא השם. It's in a hidden way. קריאה זו שהקדוש ברוך הוא קורא ליהודי מדבר תלכו דילכו בעניינים השייכים לו. God speaks to me. He speaks to you every day. The question is whether you hear. Whether you're listening, whether you're paying attention. God doesn't speak to me in English, He doesn't speak to me in Hebrew. He speaks to me through events, through things that happen to me, through things that are said in my presence. God is speaking to me all the time. The question is whether I hear it. Whether I hear it, whether I pay attention. Now, I'm not talking about the macro. Rabbi Sachs was talking about Hashgacha Klali. He's talking about Hashgacha Pratim. A particular person, things are happening to you, and are you paying attention? Or is everything just happens to be? Everything just happens to be. I want to tell you something that is slightly off, okay? I want to tell you something. You've heard a midrash at the beginning of the Gemara Baba Rizal. It's a midrash that says that all of the nations were offered the Torah. You heard that midrash before? And they all said no. You heard that midrash. So everyone knows that midrash. That God went around before He gave us the Torah. He offered all the nations of the world this, and they all said no because of this, no because of this. Where is there a source for that in the entire Torah? Where does this midrash come from? Well, they made it up. Where does it come from? Show me in Torah where there's an allusion whatsoever to the fact that God offered the Torah to the world. And after years of thinking about it, it suddenly came to me, and now I can't think in a different way. At the beginning of Parshat Yitro, the pasuk says, "Vayishma Yitro." And what does Rashi say? Mashama, what did he hear? What made him come? Could have been Kriyat Yamsuf, could have been Amalek. Later on, he talks about Yetziat Mitzrayim. And then I understood the midrash. God brought plagues to the world for a whole year. He then split the sea. The center of the world was the Middle East. Everyone saw it. Rachav talks about it in Sefer Yoshua. In Shirat Hayam it says, "Az nivalu alufei Edom elei Moab yochazenu ad namoru kol sheikh tipol aleihem imata b'pachad." Everyone knew about it, but the only one who came was Yitro. God offered the Torah to the world because God showed Himself to the world, but the only one who came was Yitro. Vayishma Yitro. Yitro heard. They all saw it, but no one heard. No one heard. They all wanted to stay in their own places, do their... No one heard. Yitro heard. I'm convinced that's the Makor of the Midrash. Because Vayishma Yitro, Yitro heard. What did he hear? He saw the events going on, and he did something about it. He said, there's something going on. And he made his way to Har Sinai. The people who didn't, they denied it. They ignored it. Nothing's going on. Just have a cup of coffee, have a good time. Nothing's going on. We just carry on as normal. Crazy ladies, you're in the middle of it. You really believe nothing's going on? You really believe nothing's going on? You ever read the history of the Nazi Party? These people came to power. A group of thugs. And they took over and conquered Europe with a lunatic in charge of them. This is all just a coincidence. Everything's just a coincidence. How he came to power in 1933, Everything's just going. How they shot the guy next to him in 1923. They blew up a podium that he was standing at 10 minutes after he left. Everything just happened to be. Everything just happened to be. You got to be joking. Don't make any sense. Vayishma Yitro heard and he came. No one else came, and therefore the Midrash says God offered himself to the world. He said, "Look, Kriya Yamsuf, look, Dams Vadeh, I'm involved in the world," and no one came. No one listened. They're too busy watching the game, or scrolling down their internet and playing on their YouTube, or posting on Instagram or TikTok and this and that, all the Twitter, all the X it's called. I know it's called X now. All that, they're so busy with that. No one hears anything. No one hears anything. The Vayikra ketiv ba'aretz se'ir v'kribe vayikra milashon mikra kol ha'morot v'hamikrim ovrim al Yehudi hareim kriya mister nafshe. Everything that happens to me, everything that happens to you is a call from God. What is he saying? I don't always know. We had this question in Quest for Authenticity yesterday. How often does God come up in your day? Maybe he comes up, I'm not excited, he comes up all the time. I mean, all the time. Just comes up all the time. In frustrations, in sadness, in happiness. It comes up all the time. These things happen to us, but they're hidden, they're not overt. God doesn't scream out your name. He doesn't scream out your name. Of course, he's talking to you. Shuv Yisrael, Shuv v'chazor l'shorashecha u'lemotorecha. Go back to yourself. Notice. We're meant to be believing Jews. We are meant to be religious Jews. What did Abraham bring to the world? What was in the world before Abraham, and what did he bring to the world? So Rashi tells us, right? So until Abraham came, people believed in a creator. They didn't believe in Mashkiach. They didn't believe in Hashkata. They didn't believe that God was involved in the world. Whether you define it like a Rambam, like Rabbi, however you want to define it. But people didn't think, they believed God is a creator. They didn't believe God is involved in the world. Abraham's Kiddush was that God is involved in the world. That was Abraham's Kiddush. That's why when we come out of Egypt and we're liberated from Egypt, the liberation is about the idea, not the people, the idea. God is involved in the world. Dam, Svadeh, Kinema. God is involved. God is controlling it. Not a president in America, not a president in Russia. God is controlling it. God is in charge. That's why we were liberated. It's a liberation of an idea. It's a liberation of an idea. Not just the people. Plenty of people in the history of mankind have been liberated. Not so many ideas. That was the Kiddush of Avraham Avinu. So we forget. That's what Judaism is. God is in the world. Define it as you wish. But God is in the world. So we've forgotten about that. He's not in the world anymore. Everything just happens to be. And sometimes we get so caught up in I said to Dr. Yochel, it's like if we go to Iraq, because I don't think people have the concentration or the focus to learn for another 3 days. Because things take over, they take over. It's so involved, and I understand it, the doubt, and something, where you're going, how you're going, takes over. You've got to be able to breathe in and have a look. Just take a look at what's going on. For a minute, just for a minute. Only for a minute. Forget yourself. Just forget yourself for a minute. The minister will be well, people will get what they need to get. Plenty of time to put. There's more than 2 weeks to put. Okay, people have time to organise. But just take a step back, and that's what we're meant to believe in. That's what we are as Jews. That's why Rav Amital said that people don't believe in Yom HaAtzmaut. They're heretics. What do you mean? It's not real. It didn't really happen. It wasn't God. It was a test. As they love to say, it was a test. God is testing us by giving us a country and an army. It's a test. I love those tests. Just give me more country, more army. Give me as much as you can. Right? Just keep testing me that way. I like them much more than tests on calculus. I didn't like tests on calculus. I like physics or Latin. Give me these tests. Give me these. God give me a country, gave me Jerusalem. Oh, test me more. Test me more. Give me a Mikdash. Test me more. Test me more. Well, I don't understand. It's a test? No. You don't have to be a Navi. I don't have to say I understand why things are happening, but something good is happening. Rav Soloveitchik once said that Rav Soloveitchik was a Litvak, right? So Rav Soloveitchik wasn't a chassid. So his celebration of Lag BaOmer was because an epidemic stopped. So Rav Soloveitchik once said, I don't understand. People stop saying Tachnun and they cut their hair and they celebrate because an epidemic stopped. They're not going to celebrate Yom Ha'atzmaut. It's not better than an epidemic stopping. That's it. It's not even better than that. Cheers for you, Spirit. Spirit. It's Spirit. So we're not going to say, that's what Rav Soloveitchik said. Well, you're not going to celebrate it. You know, I'll tell you something about the Rambam ladies, because the Rambam made it to Har HaBayit. He wrote it down, and he went to Hebron. It's written, black on white. And the Rambam writes to his family, anyone in my family, for generations to come, on this day that I went to Hebron, and on this day that I went to Yerushalayim, is a Yom Tov. And you tell me what the Rambam will say today. We have a country, we have an army, we have the Kotel, we have partial control of Har HaBayit. The Rambam made it a Yom Tov because he visited the 7 steps of Hebron. That was it. So what did he say today? That's what he would say. You see common ground here between the Tivot Shalom and Rabbi Sachs. Rabbi Sachs talked about Vayikra, the Tivot Shalom says here that Vayikra, El Moshe. God is speaking to Moshe. If something say God, you have to be able to notice that it's God. And just to finish, if you go over the page, I won't do it all with you, but if you look at Rebbe Nachman, you have a look at it inside afterwards. And Rebbe Nachman says the words, this is how you should read the Pasuk. There's so many different ways to read the Pasuk. It says, Shema Yisrael. If you listen, Israel, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem. And you will know that God is one. If you listen. If you don't listen, because you've got some kind of music playing and it's disturbing your thought process, these things are much more important when you know they're not. And you'll never know that Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. You never know. Shema Yisrael. Pay attention. And know Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Then you can pay attention. But once I tell you so many stories. And a student once came up to me at the end of Shiur Klali, at the end of Strive for Truth, I think it was, and she said, why have you got so many stories? How have you got so many stories? So I said, you've got as many stories as me. Just not paying attention. Just not paying attention. If you pay attention, you'll see how many special things are going on around you and how many fantastic things. On a personal note, ladies, I hope that did your mother and Aliyah Neshama. I was meant to give this year at about 3:30 today, and because I was working here till late last night, I promised my wife and my dad that I get home early. And because of good reasons, and a big shvur to George and Isa. At first I said, I just can't stay, I have to go. And then I wanted to make sure I got to see everyone before everyone goes in their own ways. And so, and then I realized also my wife was teaching till late, so she won't even notice I'm not home yet. So I hope you all have a Pesach Kasher V'Sameach. As I say, I will see MTA, please God, and Torani. I'm not planning to be, I have to spend some time with my dad. I'm not planning to be here tomorrow, but I will be with my phone. If you need anything or have any questions, those people stay behind. If your plans change and you can't go to Eilat and you need to stay behind, you have to please tell people. As I said, I won't let the buses go to Eilat until I know where every girl is. And again, I please ask, if you get a flight, which I'm sure you'll get sooner or later, please make sure that you inform us. I will remind, thank you. I discovered that Mashi's real name is Michal, and then I discovered that her real name, as her father calls her, is Michali. Just as I discovered that Stanley's name is Hadara. And I got a promise from Stanley's father that he'd get me tickets for my football team. He was texting me a lot. So you should have a Chag Hashem Sameach. Ladies, I pray. I have one thing that I do want to share with you. The year that Corona broke out, the day that Corona broke out, my mother passed away. And by the time I could come back to the Midrashah, there was no Midrashah left. And I never really got closure with that year. So I'm happy to know that a lot of you will be back anyway after Pesach. But I hope and pray that those of you who are traveling will manage to get back. Bezrat Hashem will manage to get back. It's a very, very important term. A lot of events, Yom HaShoah, Yom HaZikaron, Yom HaTzmaut, Yom Yerushalayim, Lag BaOmer, Shavuot, a lot of things in the summer term. We're nowhere near finished the Northern Hemisphere and certainly not the Southern Hemisphere. So Bezrat Hashem, we have a Chag Hashem Sameach and pay attention and remember what I told you last week. If you happen to fly away, never forget your people and never forget Israel.